A really warm welcome to this 10th theme, a cool head and a warm heart, and this sense of the art of balance and equanimity. And what we're doing is we're putting in place all of these foundation stones for, if you like, building the cathedral of our lives. And what by this stage we've done is we've probably put a pretty solid structure in place. You know, if you walk into a cathedral or a temple or a mosque or any of these sort of beautiful spaces, you walk in and there's a sense of the temperature and the light and stillness that's there. And this is what today's exploration is about that sense of stillness, that sense of balance. But it sits on these foundation stones that you've been putting in place, of being able to wake up and anchor and begin to really see, and more than see with a quality of friendliness, the kind of moment by moment life of our body and mind, internally, externally, and the interplay of the two. So I want to just start with a story, and it's a story that you may be familiar with, but it really speaks, I think, very nicely and very clearly to this idea of balance. It's a Greek story of Icarus and his father, Daedalus, who are stranded on an island, and they need to escape this island. And the way that Icarus's father decided that they could do this was to build some wings. And so he had to build wings out of the materials that were available to him, which were feathers, material, and wax. So he made these wings out of the feathers and the material, and then he kind of stitched them together with wax. And he said to Icarus, you know, when we fly, this wax has got just enough softness to enable us to move and to fly. But if you go too high up, too close to the sun, the wax is going to melt and the feathers, the wings are going to fall apart. And if you come too close to the sea where it's going to be colder, the wax is going to harden. And again, the wings are going to freeze up and you're going to crash. And of course, we know that Icarus found it really difficult. He was a young man. He found it really difficult to maintain a sense of balance. And he flew too close to the sun, and his wings collapsed and he crashed to the ground. So that sense of close to the sun being burnout, and perhaps close to the sea, a sense of numbness or languishing. What are the drivers for Icarus, for each of us, to move too close to the sun or too close to the sea? Well, they're the kind of human condition of praise, chasing after praise, or running away from blame, or feeling badly about blame, to look good, to perpetually chase youthfulness, to belong, the opposite, fear of feeling excluded, being liked, or a worry about being disliked. All of these are drivers for getting out of balance, a sense that what we have in this moment or in our lives or in the world is not enough, or maybe it's too much, it's overwhelming. So just take a moment and just reflect on your own life, maybe the course of today and the course of the week up to this moment. What's been a moment that wobbled you, that threw you off balance? What happened? How did you respond? And of course, this happens to us all the time. We're all the time recalibrating that space between the sun and the sea. So what today's webinar is really about is exploring how we meet those ups and downs of life, which are inevitable, with a sense of steadiness and care. How we can stay, if you like, grounded and open-hearted, even when life feels really turbulent. And that's the essence of equanimity, of balance. That in those moments, having a sense of a cool head, of steadiness in our kind of the way we're approaching it mentally, and that kind of attitude of mindfulness, a warm heart. And this is sometimes easier said than done, right? But just maybe asking you to think about how good moments come along in our lives. And it's so easy in those good moments of being with a good friend or something good happening in our professional life, or we're really enjoying some music or a show, or we have our favorite season of the year and that season is coming to an end. How do we hold that goodness, knowing that as that moment, as all moments, will come to an end? And I think the classic of this, of course, is building sandcastles. I was very lucky to raise my daughters in the southwest of England, and throughout the year we would go to the beach and we'd build sandcastles. And you're very tuned in when you live close to the sea, to the tides, and so you spend an afternoon building these wonderful sandcastles with moats and all of these kinds of things, and then you sit and watch the tide come in, and it kind of wipes these sandcastles away. Is it possible to enjoy the building of the sandcastles, knowing that the tide is going to come in, and maybe even enjoy that sense of impermanence, appreciate that sense of impermanence? And of course, that applies also to love. Knowing that to love is to risk losing love. It's a real place to practice equanimity, the kind of movement of vulnerability with a sense of giving ourselves to love nonetheless. And that, of course, is true in any project at work. I just always think about entrepreneurs when you hear people say that some very high percentage of entrepreneurs, their first few projects will fail. How do you give yourself 100% to a project, sometimes for years, knowing that it may not work? And this is what balance and equanimity, this practice, is all about. Now, one of the things that is, I think, the most classic misunderstanding about equanimity, and in Buddhist psychology, this is sometimes, you know, when we talk about a construct like equanimity or an idea like equanimity, there's this idea of what's the opposite of that, but also what's the close enemy of that. What's meant by that is it looks a little bit like equanimity, but it's not equanimity. And I think one of the real misunderstandings about equanimity, which I think is a close enemy, is that it's in no sense something passive. It's not about a lack of engagement. It's not about flatness. It's not about giving up. It's not about indifference. Quite the reverse. It's about staying up close to something, be that love, be that a project, be that a good moment, and steady with that, with a cool head and a warm heart. So I'd like to offer a practice, which is a practice of kind of exploration, if you like, of this idea of equanimity. And just maybe starting with having a sense of really coming into the body and taking care to make sure that the body feels rooted. So like a tree, a sense of the sitting bones and the feet, really rooted in the seat and the ground. providing if you like a really stable base. And if you need to just adjust the pelvis or the trunk of the body or the arms or the head, just doing that a bit like we go again with this idea of like the body being like the trunk of a tree and the arms and the head being like the branches and the top of the tree. The sense of the tree being able to flex a little bit. Really being alive with the movement of the breath in this moment. And from this place of being anchored, upright, strong, flexing like a tree, inevitably there are noises and there are sounds and there are distractions and there are things that can knock us off balance. Just seeing if we can stay anchored, steady, present, with interest. With a real lightness of awareness. By that I mean a real sense of not getting too caught up in thoughts, sounds, body sensations. Really having a sense of allowing them to come and go. If it's helpful, just having a focus for your awareness, somewhere to really gather and settle your awareness, whether that's the breath or somewhere in the body or sounds. Making an active choice to make that focus of your awareness. Nowhere to be, nothing to achieve, no state that you're going after or seeking out. Simply resting in the awareness in this moment, this exact moment. Feet, sitting bones acting as an anchor. Torso, the arms, the head, like the trunk and the foliage of a tree. And somewhere to rest the awareness, moment by moment by moment. And I want to just drop a question into the practice. And as I drop this question in, just try and stay really, really close to this moment, this exact moment. Unfolding, unfolding, unfolding. What's missing in this moment? What's lacking in this moment? See if you can stay really close to the body, anchored, upright, breathing. What's missing in this moment? If your mind gets all caught up in thinking about this question, let that go, let that go. And come back to a sense of the body sitting here, rooted, anchored, breathing. Can you rest in this moment exactly as it is? Can you rest in your awareness in this moment exactly as it is? So in this guided practice, as in all practices, there's an opportunity to cultivate balance and equanimity. And this idea that if we can bring mindfulness really into the present moment, it can reveal something that the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh often used to say, which was, peace is one breath away. Peace is one breath away. And what he's pointing to is this idea that it's our mind forecasting into the future, evaluating what's happening in the present, remembering the past, that creates worry, that creates anxiety, that creates fear, that creates sadness. And if we can come back to this breath in this moment, we can, if we stay really close to it, find peace. So I want to move to a little bit of teaching about ways in which balance is cultivated in mindfulness practice. And if we think about the other kind of balance, the physical balance of how we are balancing our bodies, we know quite a lot about this. It's to do with a number of our senses, in particular seeing. So in through the eyes and the visual cortex, we have a sense of visual space and our place in that visual space. Our ears have got this vestibular system that is very, very tied into a sense of balance and being off balance. It's what creates air sickness or travel sickness. And we have a whole other sense that beyond the five senses called proprioception, which is this sense of spatial awareness. And it's these senses together that keep us in physical balance. So what keeps us in mental balance? Well, our mind and body are doing really much the same kind of work to create a sense of mental balance. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. And when we lose our physical balance, we can have a sense of vertigo, even nausea. And if we lose our sense of mental balance, it can be very, and I love this word, discombobulating, sense of being thrown off balance. So the first way in which we are cultivating this quality in our practice is through the body-based practices. I'm thinking particularly, for example, around the body scan. The minute we pay attention to the body and we scan through the body, we encounter a whole myriad of sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And everything is there, right? Everything is there in those moments, in what the mind does as it meets the pleasant, the unpleasant, the pain, the stiffness, the ache in the back, the sense of love and peace in the chest, the sense of the smile around the eyes, around the mouth, or the frown in the forehead. It's all there. And the invitation in the practice, the body scan practice, is to bring a sense of even-handed interest to the pleasant, the unpleasant, and the neutral, and to watch the way in which the mind starts to chain. And by chain, I mean the next link in the chain. Ah, so it's pleasant. That's nice. What kind of nice is that? Oh, I can't remember feeling that the last time. I hope that stays around. It wasn't there yesterday. And so it chains and chains and chains, and the same with difficult. And the sense of bringing equanimity follows seeing that clearly and trying to have a sense of meeting the pleasant and the unpleasant in an even-handed kind of way. So the body is a really good training ground for cultivating this attitude. And that's why in mindfulness-based programs, it starts at the beginning and it's woven all the way through the program. And of course, as we've talked about in a previous webinar, the sort of distinction between the body and the mind is in many ways a bit of a, it doesn't really reflect the reality of either our experience or what we now know from, interoception and psychological science and neuroscience. But in the mind, the same thing is happening. Thoughts that become stories, that become reality, that become who we are, who other people are, who the world is. And what we're beginning to do with mindfulness practice is to begin to see, again, the chaining of a thought. And the classic one of somebody, for example, with a history of depression who wakes up in the middle of the night is, oh no, I've woken up in the middle of the night. This must be an early warning sign of depression. I'm going to be tired tomorrow. I'm going to spiral downwards and I'm not. This is the chaining. And being able to see those thoughts as thoughts that come, that go, that pass, that aren't facts, moods in the same way that arise and pass. All of this is cultivating equanimity. One of the things that's been a recurrent theme all the way through these webinars is that the practices that we do, the mindfulness practices that we do, are for life. What I mean by that is they are to support us in our life and for a lifetime. But our life is also a form of practice. And in a way, they're the same thing. The distinction between the practice that we do when we get on a yoga mat or we sit on a meditation cushion or we walk is really in many ways much as the same as what we do when we bring awareness with these attitudes of befriending with a sense of ethics and intention to our life. They're really the same thing. So every time we have a sense of being knocked off balance, or we see one of the things that we know that drives us to be off balance, the praise, the blame, the belonging, the exclusion, the wanting to be loved, being loved too much. These are chances to practice looking clearly with a sense of curiosity and friendliness and seeing if there's a way of finding in the midst of that a sense of balance and equanimity. So I'd like to just read a story which is in the book, in my book, Mindfulness for Life, but it's an ancient traditional story, Chinese story, that's apparently based on Tao's teaching. So here it goes. Once upon a time, there was a hard-working farmer in the central region of China. He was married and had one teenage son who also worked on the farm. He didn't have a lot of money, and instead of a tractor, he had a horse that he'd taken care of for many years to plow the fields on the family farm. And as you hear this story, just have a sense of whether or not you have a sense of a story and an identity emerging, and where there is a sense of either the farmer or you, as you're listening to this, is being knocked off balance. So the horse was now old and struggling with the work. One afternoon, while working in the fields, the horse's heart failed and he died suddenly. The family was very sorry to lose their horse after years of service, but didn't have enough money to buy another. Everyone in the village said, "Oh, what a horrible thing to happen. How difficult for the farmer and his family." The farmer said, "Maybe, maybe not." He was so calm that everyone in the village got together and gave him a new horse as a gift. The farmer took good care of the new horse to settle it into its life on the farm. But a couple of days later, the new horse jumped the fence and ran away. Everyone in the village shook their heads and said, "What a poor fellow." Farmer said, "Maybe, maybe not." Eventually, the horse found his way home, and everyone again said, "That's lucky. The farmer has his horse back." And the farmer said, "Maybe, maybe not." Later in the year, the farmer's son went out riding on the horse and fell and broke his leg. Everyone in the village said, "What a shame for the poor boy." The farmer said, "Maybe, maybe not." Because 2 days later, the army came into the village to draft new recruits. And when they saw that the farmer's son had a broken leg, they decided not to recruit him. Everyone said, "What a fortunate young man." And the farmer said, "Maybe, maybe not." So in Taoism, this points to this sense that we can have what feels like a disaster, or we can have what feels like a sense of good fortune, which is the driver for getting out of balance. And the practice here is trying to hold a sense of spaciousness, a sense of possibility, a sense of not getting too attached to what we think the next chains in the link of that particular process is likely to be. And this plays out, doesn't it, in all of the areas of our life. Particularly, I've just spent the afternoon today on a web call with people from all over the world, and people were sharing about things that are happening in their countries. And there was a real sense of people feeling confused and afraid and out of balance. And there was something about a group of people coming together that I think helped people to hold on to this idea of being strong and vulnerable at the same time, and open and closed, trusting and mistrustful, and courageous and knowing when the limits of that courage were possible. So many challenges in our own life, but in the wider world just now, but even in terms of our planetary health, to be knocked off balance. So many places to ask what feels like a wise response. And equanimity and all of the other attitudes of mindfulness are in the service of supporting that question and the answer to it. What will serve me and others? What will serve the wider community? What will serve the world in this moment? So I'd like to just share an extract from the book, which is what you'll hear, first of all, is one of the kind of I don't know, devices in the book, if you like, which I've called the ancient oak. And the ancient oak is basically the holder of the contemplative traditions and the wisdom traditions. And he's speaking about what's sometimes called the serenity prayer. And I'll let him describe that. And immediately after that, we go into one of the characters, an older woman, Sophia, who is sitting on the beach with her daughter and her grandson, Noah. So I'll just share my screen. and then I will play this clip. So we start off with the ancient oak. Here's the ancient oak on equanimity and serenity.
We are developing the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Serenity needs a cool head and a warm heart. Courage involves embracing what we like, bearing what we don't, being okay with change, and having the courage to make necessary changes. Wisdom involves tapping into our different ways of knowing and making discerning choices with a sense of trust. This central idea, sometimes called the Serenity Prayer, has its roots in many philosophical, for example, Stoicism, and religious traditions, for example, the Bhagavad Gita in Hinduism and the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism, and is widely used in mainstream 12-step recovery groups.
When I was first diagnosed with Parkinson's, I got busy compulsively so. I researched it, got second opinions, changed my diet, bought a fitness tracker, and joined different support groups. I guess I was hoping that somewhere I'd find the key to unlocking this awful place I found myself, a good life, but an awful diagnosis. The busyness was driven by worry, resentment, why me, and sometimes outright terror. Parkinson's disease demands equanimity. I had to accept that its progression was inevitable. I knew people who had it, and now I'm seeing it for myself. One evening, I was on a sandbank with my daughter and grandson. The sun was starting to set and the tide was coming in. We'd have to move in an hour or two, as the sea would reclaim the whole sandbank. Noah and I had spent the afternoon building sand castles, and now I was reading a self-help book about living with Parkinson's. Noah came to sit on my lap, sucking his thumb. He fell asleep as the sun set, and the heat went out of the day. I felt so much happiness and love in those moments. I realized that my struggle to come to terms with my diagnosis was feeding my fear. Carrying Noah back to the car, I put the self-help book in the bin and chatted to my daughter about what we'd cook for dinner. The Parkinson's was just as inevitable and powerful as the tide. I started to introduce these phrases into my daily meditation. I care for you deeply. Things are as they are. I'll take joy in all that is right with my body and life. I accept, allow, and embrace as best I can all that is weakening in my body. I'd end my daily mindfulness practice with a sense of purpose to carry these intentions into my day and live each day fully. I had a powerful sense that, like the sand castle, everything is impermanent, and that really supports my equanimity. This too will pass. More and more, I was able to live this in my day-to-day life.
Children love to build. More technical glitch. Chance to meet it with equanimity. So Sophia's example there speaks for itself, and it also points to something which I think comes at this stage in this series of webinars, is the way in which Sophia had built into her practice a way of cultivating the qualities that she needed, the attitudes that she needed to support her with all of her different roles, and in particular with the progression of her Parkinson's. So I want to just move to another practice, which is the breathing space. But the breathing space now, in the same way I've just described with Sophia, just adapted in a way that you're able to use it in a way that supports balance in your life. And just before I go into leading the breathing space, I want to just describe a kind of bit of psychological science, which Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about and many other emotion scientists have spoken about in her classic book about the emotional landscape. And she calls it the circumflex model. But it's a very simple idea of our emotions have, at their simplest, got these kind of two dimensions. The one is whether the emotion is kind of one that feels very activating, very arousing, like very energizing, or just feels quite sluggish and dull at the other end of the dimension. So you've got very sluggish to incredibly energized as one of your dimensions. And the other dimension is whether the emotion feels good or it feels bad, pleasant or unpleasant. So a very, very energized and good, pleasant emotion would be something like enthusiasm or passion. And the opposite in terms of negative would be anger. And then if you go to the other extreme and you think about sluggishness and negative, it would be, well, probably depression or really feeling kind of low on energy and a bit low and down. And low energy, but positive would be a sense of ease, a sense of kind of just total kind of peace and ease without a move to action. And I mention this because this is something that we can, in step one of the breathing space, just introduce very lightly when we ask, what's the state of my body and mind just now? Pleasant, unpleasant, highly energized, or a bit dull? So in step one, just taking a moment to really come into the body and have a sense of the body feeling upright and open. And checking in to the state of the body and the mind. Is there a word or a phrase to describe what's happening in the body as you scan through it, and the mind as you just take note of what's here? Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Is it energetic, or is it really low on energy? Once you've noted this, just coming to a sense of anchoring your awareness on breathing. Again, really close to this moment as the breath moves into the body and out of the body. Sense of anchoring and gathering the mind around the breath in this moment. And it may be that you just need to calibrate a different kind of anchor depending on the state of mind and body. So if you're feeling really lethargic and sleepy and low on energy, might need to just maybe put your hand on your belly or have a real sense of just coming into the body and really close up to the strength of the sensations. Or if you're feeling very peaceful and at ease, maybe the anchor can be much lighter. More subtle. And then when you're ready in the third step of the breathing space, just opening the awareness out to a sense of the whole body. Sitting here, breathing. And if you find your mind getting caught up in any body sensations or thoughts or stories, it's having a sense of letting go of those thoughts, letting go of those stories and coming back to the anchor. And there may be some phrases, just as you heard with Sophia, that feel helpful to you to let go of whatever might be around, particularly if it has a kind of pressing or ruminating kind of quality. As best you can, just letting your experience be exactly as it is. Letting your experience be exactly as it is. So I'd like to just close this evening's webinar with a poem. But just before I do that, just to kind of recap, the kind of driver, a bit like Icarus, to move too close to the sun, to a sense of excitement and passion, or to become maybe lethargic and a bit kind of low energy, too close to the sea, is something that we all encounter as these drivers to knock us out of balance, a part of every moment, every day, transitions of our life. And mindfulness practice, body focused, mental process focused, and our life are all ways in which we can cultivate equanimity. And it's an ongoing and a lifelong process. So this apparently is one of the most famous, not famous, one of the most popular poems in the English language. And I'm not going to read all of it, I'll just read a couple of extracts. It's Rudyard Kipling's If. If you can keep your head when all around you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired of waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat these two impostors just the same. And then I'll just skip to the end of the poem. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, not lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So maybe just by way of closing, just inviting you to think about the rest of the day ahead and the week ahead, what it would look like to bring a sense of balance, that kind of sense of investigation and exploration that Rudyard Kipling in his poem If is talking to. Thank you very much for your kind attention.